Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com program, brought to you by Techstrong and Planview, or formerly Tasktop. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning, and we have an exciting presentation for you ahead. First, I do have a couple of housekeeping notes. So today's session is being recorded. If you miss any of our discussion, or you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session today. If you have any questions, we want you to send those in to us using the Q&A tab, which you'll find on the right side of the screen. We plan on answering those questions toward the end of the program, so please do send them in early and often. I'll also point you in the direction of the chat tab on the right side of the screen, and that's where we want you to get to know your fellow audience members. Let us know where you're from, or maybe just any thoughts you have throughout today's program. And of course, before we close, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so be sure to stick around. So our topic today is the ROI of integration, must-have capabilities to maximize efficiency and communication. And I'm joined by Jeff McCollum, Senior Director of Product Development at Planview, and Wendy Flowers, Senior Value Stream Architect at Planview. Wendy and Jeff, thank you both so much for being here. Wendy, are you going to get us kicked off?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for that introduction. My name is Wendy Flowers. I am a Senior Value Stream Architect at Tasktop. What I do at Tasktop is I help customers see how our tools can help you be successful in what you're doing. My background, I used to run a PMO of all things, and then I have also been an Agile coach, and then also kind of a change management person who helps implement change within customers as you're going through some cultural change management as well. And I am joined by Jeff McCollum.
Hi, I'm Jeff McCollum. I'm the Senior Director of Product Management here at Planview. I've worked with Tasktop and now Planview for about 4 years, and in that time I've been responsible for the product development of our Tasktop Integration Hub product. Before my time here at Tasktop and Planview, I worked at a company called Bazaar Voice, where I worked at kind of a shared services team, but one of the teams I managed and was responsible for was a team of about 6 people. And what they did was to understand the ROI from the expected ROI from our clients and calculate that and communicate that effectively. So, that was kind of their full-time job year-round. And I got to say, as sort of a shared services team, when it came to budget time, I also used their skills to help, make our ROI case as we wanted. So that's where I'm coming from. And I just kind of like to go through the agenda that we plan on talking about today. First is sort of how to understand the value of toolchain integration, or at least how we think of it. And then I'll hand it off to Wendy, who can talk about capabilities to look for in an integration solution in order to maximize your ROI. And then finally, it'll come back to me, and I'll talk about how to effectively communicate ROI internally in your organization, not just necessarily for toolchain integration, the ROI of that, but sort of more broadly about how to communicate the ROI of your team. So go ahead and get it kicked off. I want to start with just kind of this slide. This is the Tasktop Integration Hub product. I'm not going to go through any sort of tour, but I just wanted to sort of point your attention to the top bar where it says metrics. This is one of the simplest sort of features that we've introduced recently. But if you click through on metrics on the Tasktop Integration Hub, it takes you to this screen. And one of the things we introduced, in the last year or so, was this section, which is essentially just, a calculated ROI of the solution. And what went into this is a good amount of research, a little bit of math, and maybe, not quite enough UX. We're still working on it, but that's what it is. So we take sort of ROI, and me personally, I take ROI very seriously. I want to be able to prove the value of our product and in a way that can be communicated effectively. So what do we think of as the ROI for tools integration? For starters, it might be good to kind of talk about what we think about tools integration here. Integration is basically integrating work items that flow across value stream in generally software development, but really any value stream. So that when somebody enters an entry on one tool, say Salesforce, that information could flow all the way through the value stream from, to a product management tool, to Jira potentially, to maybe Servicenow, maybe to, a testing tool and a release tool. So that's what integration is to us. Now, how do we think about the ROI of that? What is the value of integration? Well, there's basically, I think of it in 5 basic categories. One is just to maintain the fidelity of work items across the tool chain, so that you're not losing the essential parts of a request between, say, a support ticket or a feature request, and the work that's later done to support that support ticket or feature request. So if somebody says, I really need this fixed, or a salesperson says, or I really need, in order to close this deal, or to support our customers more fully, I need this feature. Well, they usually live in something like Salesforce or a CRM system. If they enter it there, we need to maintain that the essence of their make sure that the essence of their request makes its way to all the appropriate people inside the organization. That's one, fidelity of items across the tool chain. 2 is that integration helps you maintain a single system of record for reporting. So, I also manage I've managed an analytics team, and that team is trying to provide analytics to different parts of the organization. And with integration, you can consolidate all the necessary information into one tool and then do the reporting in that tool, instead of having to, go into tool A, export a CSV, tool B, export another CSV, merge that all together, then run a report on that. It makes it much easier to just have all the information in a single source, a single system of record, so that reporting can be done there. Another one is just a single source of truth for the plan, the work in progress, and results. So one thing to think about is that in a value stream, tools represent teams in a certain way. So again, as I mentioned before, if you're in a CRM system, or if you're in Salesforce or something, the people who use Salesforce are frequently sales folks, customer service folks, account management, people like that. The people who use a product management tool are, product management professionals. People who use Jira or ADO or some sort of, DevOps tool are engineers, and so on and so on. And each one of those stages, they want to make sure that, what the plan is consistent across these different tools. And if it's consistent across those different tools, it's more likely to be consistent across those different teams. So it helps, make that sort of single source of truth for the plan, WIP, and results. A byproduct of this, and it's sort of related, is that if everyone is sharing the same information and can see the work being done on different parts of the organization, and different departments, by different people, by different types of people, it sort of brings the team's work closer together. And I know that sounds kind of nebulous, but I think this is a very important part of what integration brings to our team. I'm in product management, I'm in product development. I can look in our tools and see that support is working on something, that account management is working on something, right? That security, if they're a different team, is working on something. And where do I see that? I see that in the tools that we most commonly use internally, right? And I think it's interesting. I think it might be, it sounds like a minor thing, but if you're working hard in your little area of the business, you want to see that other people are working hard in their area of the business. It's motivating. I think there's, probably some, master's thesis or PhD dissertation out there, or at least a topic that just says, well, how motivated are people when they know that other people are motivated and working hard, right? So integration of the tools helps integration of the teams, which helps motivation, right? And then the last thing is sort of a simple but super powerful time savings or capacity increase. So this is the one that I referred to earlier. It's a little bit of what I showed on the product itself. But what do we think about calculating time savings? When you have integrated tools, in order to do all those things we talked about before, maintain a single source of truth, maintain the communication between different teams, you can update, a record in your tool of choice. If you're a developer, that might be Jira, and then that can propagate to the different tools internally. Instead of you having to, if you're working on a ticket and it requires some dev work, and your organization uses, say, Servicenow as an ITSM tool, you don't want to have your developer, who's used to working in, let's say, Jira, do their work, update a ticket in Jira, and then have to update the same thing in ServiceNow just to make sure that that's communicated. So switching tools takes time, and crucially, switching tools takes attention and sort of requires a mental context switching. There have been studies, we've looked at a number of these. Recently, there's a study, I think, in concert with Cornell University that says essentially switching apps, it takes you about 9.5 minutes to go from working in this app to working in another one, to kind of finding your flow again in the original app. So where a developer is as productive as she was earlier. For our ROI calculation, we intentionally on that tool, we intentionally took an extremely conservative, probably too conservative, sort of 3 minutes per app switch baseline. So essentially, every integration saves the time it would require to switch apps. We assign a sort of 3-minute time to that. Wendy and I were actually talking about this yesterday. She's like, well, I don't know why you guys made it so low, right? It should be higher. And she's probably right about that, but I didn't want to overstate it. We might change it later, but 9.5 minutes seems maybe a little bit high to me, but I think 6 minutes is easily defensible number for that. So that's how we think about ROI, the sort of axes of ROI. Next, I'm going to hand it off to Wendy. And this is how it's sort of represented, again, in the tool, this calculated ROI section and the hours saved across the tool chain. We'll get back to this later on and how, that might be facilitated and communicated. But first, I'm going to hand it off to Wendy, who's going to talk about our, must-have capabilities in an integration solution to maximize efficiency, communication, and ROI. So, Wendy.
Thanks, Jeff. So a couple of things too, before we get through that, when Jeff's talking about switching context, it's not only the switching of context, but think about this as I go through the must-have capabilities. As you go through and you have what it is your must-have capabilities, but imagine, as I was running a PMO, I would have my business analysts, and then I would have my developers, and then I would have my testers. What would happen is, along the way, the requirements would change. And if we didn't have these tools integrated, a lot of times, and I actually had this happen to me once, the developer coded to the wrong requirement because we had changed the requirement and we forgot to update their tool as well. So it's also that cost savings that comes with developing the correct code. So think about that as we're looking through the efficiency or the capabilities that we need. So these are the must-have capabilities that I've seen throughout the years. I've been at Tasktop for about 4 years. And prior to that, as I mentioned before, I was a Scrum Master, I ran PMO. And in here, though, there were things that I was thinking about, like if I was looking for an integration tool, what would I need to look for originally? And as I go through, I'm like, it's going to have to support my tools. We need to make sure it's always working. We want to be able to add new endpoints because things change in the industry and, procurement changes and tools get swapped in and out. How can you easily add those, as well as can you scale and add those, handle large deployments? Some companies start off really small and then they grow really, really big. Some companies are already really big. So how do we scale those deployments? We want to make sure that you support your workflows and business processes. We'll talk about that in just a second. That one's probably one of my favorites. And then make sure that it's really easy to do. You don't want to have a lot of code, and you don't want to have a lot of maintenance and overhead, because then that cuts into your ROI. So first thing of supporting the tools that you're working with. So, there's a lot of tools in the industry, and there's a lot of standards that are out there. So you want to make sure, this is a comprehensive list, and this is actually what Tasktop supports, but there are other integrations out there too. And you want to make sure that they support your tools. So, and the other thing is that you can upgrade your tools as well. So, there's security changes, and there's GDPR, and there's also other privacy things that you have to maintain. So those tools upgraded, or there's new functionality. Gone are the days that we had on-prem tools and you never upgraded them. So we want to make sure that you can upgrade those, and your integrations will still work for you. And also having confidence that your version will work. So let's say you don't want to upgrade your tool, will it continue to work? And the answer is absolutely. You want to make sure that all of your versions work. Now, eventually things get sunsetted, and yep, we all still have to upgrade. But in the meantime, let's make sure that they all work. The other thing is making sure that they work all the time. So you're reducing those outages. So what is the testing that takes place? At Tasktop, we run 500,000 tests a day to make sure it's actually more than that. Jeff could probably tell you how many there are, but we want to make sure that all of our integrations work, and all of our connectors work. So our connectors are when we connect out to those tools, and we're utilizing the REST APIs by the organization. So by the lean kits, by the Servicenows and the Jira. So how do we make sure that those all work every day? And we also get new releases from those customers or from those vendors as well. And we start running tests against those. And how we do this is we try to get the market's most comprehensive list of the tools that are out there. So we want to make sure that, and when new tools come on the market, we're paying attention to that as well. So you want to make sure that as new tools come on the market, that whoever your integration is, that they're building that connector for you as well. So that covers our first two: support the tools, that's huge, and then operates with high reliability. So let's talk about adding new endpoints and easily scale. The average IT enterprise, so you will have hundreds to thousands of projects, and your tools, you're going to have 5 to 10 core tools. Some places have more, some places have multiple instances of the same tool, and that happens. We'll integrate 2 tools that are exactly the same. And they have 30 to 40 artifact types or work item types. So if I say artifact types, work item types, so features, defects, stories, whatever it is in your tool that you name those. Then within each of those, you're going to have 30 to 100 fields, depending. And we usually tell you to integrate. We'll tell you to integrate, 10 to 20. But there are sometimes that have hundreds of fields that you will have different field values, and you're going to have hundreds of possibilities of field values and states. So you want to make sure that within your organization, you can actually scale up and you can accommodate all of those fields in those different field states. So looking at it, if you were to choose a point-to-point integration, what's going to happen is setting up a point-to-point mapping, you're going to have 500, 300, 1,000 hours of complexity over the time. And in there, you can go through there's a lot of overhead, and there's a lot of maintenance that comes into doing a point-to-point integration. Can you do it for one-to-one? Absolutely. If you have one tool going to one tool, one project, one artifact type, everything's the same. Point-to-point might work. Once you start to add in those additional projects, though, you might have different field values. So that's where point-to-point really will start to then dip into your ROI that you're seeing. And so you want to make sure that you have something that can be easily scalable and maintainable. So if you look here, this is just kind of a translation account. So if you have 1-to-1, like I mentioned, 3-to-3, you're going to have 3. Once you start to add in about 6 tools, you're going to have 15 different translations. So what that means is that is 15 point-to-point integrations for 6 tools to maintain. And that's just connecting the tools. That's not necessarily connecting all your artifacts. So add that in there. Now you have additional point-to-point integrations that are in there as well. So what we recommend is that you have a translator that sits in the middle. And that's how Jeff's, Tasktop Hub, as Jeff was talking about, that's how actually we do things, is that we have a translator. We term it as models. So we're going to talk through that a little bit of what the approach is. So the approach is, what you want to do is you have something in the middle that translates, converting, normalizing the data as it flows between the systems. And it eliminates the inefficiencies of that point-to-point mapping. So we're going to go through and I'm going to show you a couple of things of how that actually works. But what happens along the way too is that we can connect it to any one of those repositories and add in additional tools. We can reuse, as we go through and we build things out, we reuse the same models. And we also reuse, and I'll talk to you about what collections are in just a second. So this would be a point-to-point. This is something that we came up with, a point-to-point mapping versus model-based integration. So if you have 2 tools and you expand it to 3 tools, and then, 4 tools for mature and, more mature implementation, a lot of times you'll have those, then you have the number of artifacts. So 2, 3, and 4. If you're looking down at the bottom for the mappings without models, if you get to those 4 tools and you have 4 artifact types, we average about 600 different mappings. Whereas with that translation, you'll have about 24. So as you're looking for a way to integrate, look for something that does that translation. Look for a tool that's out there that you can do that model-based or translation integration so that you don't have to build those 600. Because again, we're talking about ROI and you're getting, you want to get the biggest bang for your buck. So let's go through and make sure that you are not, by maintaining whatever integration it is, you're not dipping into that ROI of savings by having that information flowing. So next, we're going to talk about support your workflows and business processes. As you go through, what you're going to see is most of the time, so my 2 examples here are Servicenow and Jira. I have different statuses in Servicenow than I do in Jira. Most drop-down fields and 2 tools do not match. That just is. Everybody wants their own. Everybody wants to have their own selections. So in here, with what is in the middle would be the model or the translator. We can also not only map the field. So if you look at the top where you have number, it goes into formatted ID then translates to ID in Jira. But you're also going to be able to translate those statuses. So everybody can keep their statuses. So that if I take a defect and I send it over from Servicenow into Jira, because we need that development team to work on it, the new will flow over to new, open goes to 2 and active. But then once I get to pending, I want that to stay in that in progress state. So it'll flow back as in progress, and then it'll go back into Servicenow as work in progress. But then once it's resolved, I maybe want to send that over to closed complete. So we can also default things that are in there as well. So I'm going to send it to done. It can be closed complete. There's different things we can do as well with the drop downs to say, we can have a many to one, we can have a many to many. It just depends on what it is that you're looking for. But you want to make sure that the teams that are working within those tools can maintain their anonymity and go ahead and they can still maintain their processes, and the business can maintain those processes as well. So the last thing is going to be the ease of configuration and being able to add in the new projects and add in the new endpoints in there. So what we're going to take a look at is this is what a model would look like. And this is, of course, Tasktop Hub. But in the model, you can see I have my labels. I have the field type that I want it to be. And then I also have, if it's a single select, the values that are going to be my translator in the middle that are going to normalize that data for me. Once we have that model, then we're going to start to move on to our collections. And with our collections, we can also define what projects we're going to pull in from Lean Kit, what it's going to show us in the Lean Kit area. And, then we can start to map the additional projects that are in there as well. So in here, you can see I have card type on the left, and it's going to type when it goes into the model. Same thing with title goes to summary. So it's not called summary in Lean Kit. It's called title. So then we can translate that over. And then what that'll actually look like is that when I have these fields mapped, I can then flow these across, and this integration is actually Q-test to Lean Kit. So I can flow that summary into the title, and I can have that information flowing bidirectionally and get those bidirectional updates. And if you're worried about status for like state transitions, you want to make sure that you can handle those as well, because you're going to have those workflows within those tools to be able to handle, how, it can go from one status to the next status, but then not go, to a certain status. We can handle, you want to make sure the tool can handle those state transitions as well. And then this is the potential. So this is actually just a quick screenshot of my demo instance. And as you can see in here, on the white boxes are actually the artifact type named. And then in the middle is the name of the model. Now, the beauty of this is that those collections that I showed you, the collection, I just keep reusing that over and over. And if I need to add in more projects, I can click. It's a few clicks to be able to do that. So what you want to do with the ease of configuration is you want to make sure there's not a lot of maintenance, because again, eats into your ROI. So you want something that's really easily point and click, go in, make the modifications you need. If you need to add in a new field, you can absolutely do that as well. So the advantages of having this is that you're going to decrease the number of mappings, again, which means you're going to get more ROI out of it. You're going to have a faster setup as well. And then the time saved on the integration maintenance along the way as well, you're going to be at about 90%. So again, you want to make sure that while you're getting ROI from integration, that you have the right tool in place so that you can get, the ROI from the maintenance as well. So really, you're going to standardize that data too, so you can do the cross-tool standardization. So you don't have to worry about, ITSM tools to PPM tools to developer tools. That's not, you want to make sure that you can convert all that. You make sure to then, as Jeff mentioned, for the reporting, you have that information in there as well, so that you can see, what's happening, and you don't have to go to multiple tools per se to do that reporting. So we covered all the must-have capabilities, making sure that it's scalable, making sure you can handle those large deployments, supporting your workflows as well. That's probably the biggest concern that I get from customers, is making sure that they, I don't want to have to change my statuses or anything along those lines. Oh, sorry, I skipped too many. So really the benefits of integration when it comes to that ROI is going to be eliminates the overhead of the duplicate entry. So that's what Jeff talked about. Switching, context switching is huge. Making sure that everybody has the same information as well. Accelerate your speed to delivery so that you're not going back and forth. Everything is maintained in the tools. If you have comments that need to flow back and forth instead of multiple emails that are flowing across. And then, as Jeff mentioned, the cross-team collaboration, oh my goodness, because teams can now communicate and they don't have to get up and go find someone. They can put it in the tool, they can send messages back and forth, and we can integrate those as well, improving your time to value and enabling the end-to-end visibility and measurement. So you're flowing all of that data across. You don't have to worry about, where is this tool and how do we get this information into there? And the traceability is gigantic from the aspect of, we have auditors that come in that take a look at what is the development process. Now you have that end-to-end traceability so that you can see where that original artifact was created and how it flowed through end to end. So as we're talking about, the ROI and the metrics that Jeff is going to, I'm going to pass it back to Jeff that he's going to continue speaking to. It's also that maintenance of the application that you have as well. So Jeff, back to you.
All right, thank you. All right, so I just want to finish this off by talking about sort of how to effectively communicate ROI internally to your organization. And really, I'm speaking specifically, if you're on this webinar and you're from a team that's called maybe a center of excellence, a tools team, or maybe a shared services, those teams with a lot of internal customers, those are the folks that I have a lot of sympathy for. I used to run an organization like that, and I think that's an area where the ROI of a team like that is sometimes overlooked and sometimes not super efficiently communicated. So how best to communicate ROI internally? I think first and most important is to think of your team as a business, especially if you're a shared service, a center of excellence, a tools team like that. It's easy, relatively easy, to show the value of a sales team, right? You point at revenue. Certainly, finance and account receivable and stuff like that is relatively straightforward. But it's certainly not impossible to show the ROI of a center of excellence, a tools team, a shared services team. And I think it's probably more, it's easier than people think. So let's talk about integration within that framework. Okay, what is the ROI of it? So you should think of the communication of ROI, of the ROI of integration as representing a type of value your team, not just the tool, provides. Okay. And yes, I'd say this is essentially a marketing exercise internally. And I know some, having been there, a lot of people in the call are kind of bristling, as like, oh, I don't want to do that. But it's not, it doesn't need to be as distasteful as it sounds, right? Not to throw any shade on marketing. We love marketing. They're on this call currently. But one of the things to think about is that the ROI of your team is going to be kind of audience specific. So if you think about it, well, you're providing via integration and otherwise value to finance, especially, and you're providing value to finance, and you're providing value in a way, you want to present it in a way that finance understands. Well, this is probably a bit of an oversimplification, but what are the terms that finance understands? Well, they understand dollars and cents, and they understand it extremely well. So the ROI you want to communicate, potentially to a team like that, and this may come in really handy when you're doing a budgeting cycle, when it comes to integration, is, well, is the resulting increase in capacity worth more than the cost of integration? And does integration save more than it costs, right? And we'll show again some of the tooling we have in the Hub product to help you make that case. But that's something you could talk about with finance. The individual development teams or individual other teams that a center of excellence might serve internally, generally the axis of value that they're interested in, again, is sort of increased capacity. So, like, in other words, were it not for integration, your team would have to do all this other stuff. We do have integration, so your team doesn't have to do that other stuff. So they could be working on higher value things for them that are maybe not easily automatable. Coding, for example, of course. And another thing about this is that, managing a product development team now, one of the things that product development people really don't like is toil, right? Engineers, if I can paint with a broad brush here, like engineering for the engineering of it, the software engineering. They're not there to update a bunch of different tools. Not that anybody it is, but it's, I think, particularly distasteful for engineers to have to do that. And so if you can, communicate to the product development team, hey, listen, we have provided this service of integration to you. And what that means is that your team doesn't have to do as much toil as it normally would. And so they can focus on, the things that they're really good at, engineering. And also, it's a employee satisfaction thing. If you have, and in the market currently, engineers are hard to get. And if you can make an environment where engineers get to do what they like to do and don't have to do what they don't like to do, then that helps. So talking to product development, especially on that axis of value, is important. Sales and services, in my experience, the value of integration brought to sales and services, there's lots of them, but one of the main ones is just communication, right? Sales and services, especially if they're expecting product development to build something, to fix a defect, to build a feature, they want to know as quickly as possible, preferably in real time, what the progress is on that defect or on that feature. And if you can have that information flow from, say, Jira to, say, Salesforce, where these sales and services people live, or Servicenow, where potentially customer service people might sort of live, if you can have that flow more efficiently, those folks get updated quicker in more real time, so they can turn around and provide updates to their customers, to the customers that they're overseeing. And services and salespeople, that's what they want to do. They want to make their customers happy. And they want the information at the ready so that they can do their best to make their customers happy. And integration it's not a panacea. It's not gonna fix everything, but it helps. It helps speed along that communication. Analytics, right? Sometimes analytics is part of the shared services function, and sometimes it's not. In mine previously it was. And so you have this sort of very internal ROI, the ROI of your own team if you're overseeing that. But if it's a separate team from the one who manages an integration solution, then there is real value, as I said before, about having that analytics team not have to go to a lot of different systems to find that sort of nugget of information they're looking for, that they can communicate the data internally to their internal customers, right? And I maybe don't have the time to talk about it now, but that's a measurable thing, right? It's a measurable ability to be able, and it's a measurable benefit to be able to go into a single tool and find all the information you want. Wendy also, mentioned auditing and security and traceability across the tool chain. There's, extraordinary value to be able to show auditing, hey, this is what happened to this piece of work that we were doing, and then it went into this tool, and this with this tool, and then this person worked on it, and this person worked on it, and these people didn't see it because they're in this tool, and there's no indication that they did see it, right? So auditing and security is frequently another one of those things that's sort of overlooked. It doesn't generate revenue. It's people think of it as sort of a burden, but it's so important. And integration is one part of the overall value that a shared services team can bring to a team like that. So I wanted to show you just kind of one more time. This is a picture of Hub again, that same page that I showed you before. You go up, and if you're a Hub user on the call, you go up into metrics. It's very easy. It's right there. And what this is, we put in some capabilities. I'd like to put in more. We have some ideas about how to make this internal reporting easier. And essentially, this is kind of filters, right? Integrations don't always, but frequently in our terminology, they represent a team or a function of the business. And if in our tool, you can filter by an integration. In this case, it's Andy's ops, right? This is an operations team sort of owned by Andy. And you say, well, in this time range, maybe in the past year, what is the ROI? What is the hours saved for Andy's team above what they would have to do were it not for integration, right? And you go over here and you see that there's 24 hours, right? And 24 hours over the course of a year, it's nice. It's not a huge amount, but this is just one integration. I think we have close to 60 or something in this little tool. That's just an internal tool that we use. So that's one thing you can show Andy. In another situation, here's another one, a CS Pro Server. This is a lean kit to Salesforce integration, as you see in the name of it. And you see that, the calculated ROI there is 32 hours over the course of the year. How many artifacts were created. You can see that across the board. And you just say, to the CS Pro Serve team, what have we done for you, right, over the last year? And you can sort of show this when it comes to budgeting time for your team. And I know a lot of these teams are strapped for budget, right? You can show demonstrably, at least when it comes to integration, a sort of calculated ROI. And this hours saved is based on a 3-minute per app switch calculation. I think that's pretty conservative. I know it's very conservative, but it's a place to start. The last thing is just how to sort of tactically communicate it. When I did this before, one of the things we made sure to do is to your internal customers and external customers, but we did this with our internal customers. You say, well, what is it we're providing for you? What is it you want us to provide for you? And what is that thing that if we were able to provide it more of, you'd get a better service from us. So you sort of define the axes of value. And of course, you have an ability to influence this in this discussion with internal teams. And then you measure that, right? And you communicate it regularly. You can consider sort of a regular digest. That is to say, you have maybe a monthly or quarterly email or some other mechanism where you can say, here's what our team has provided for you over the last quarter. I think that's a good practice to have. It puts everything in writing. I think it's generally more effective to meet in person regularly with your internal customers. That way you formulate better shared understanding of what they're working on, what you're working on, how you can better serve them. And then you can modify maybe the axes of value later on. If you add an additional tool, maybe a non-integration tool that also contributes to time savings. You can layer that in and say, hey, we're thinking about adding this service. Would you like to use this service? Because I think it would benefit you in X and Y ways. That communication internally, if you do it consistently throughout the year, I'd say when it comes to budgeting time, you will have advocates in your internal organization that you have shown them real, demonstrable, calculatable, agreed upon ROI, and you'll have, you'll certainly be closer to having advocates when it comes to maintaining, potentially expanding your budget, expanding your team, being able to do more to help your internal customers. So with that, that's the last slide. I think we're getting a few questions. So I'm not sure if we want to manage them now. Let's see. I think we have one here. A question: what are the best ways for internal and external communications team to communicate better with each other so that they're on the same page more often, especially with more remote hybrid workforce? So these days, that's a great idea. I mean, it's a great question, and one that's, I think, broader than this discussion here. I'd say for the communication of ROI generally, and particularly with integration, I would say a standing meeting. I'm not an advocate of standing meetings, but I think in this case it's good on a pace that's reasonable. I wouldn't want to do this every week. I may not even want to do it every month when it comes to communicating ROI, but in some regular basis, you want to check in. You may have a meeting where you check in just to discuss the progress of stuff, and you can layer on let's once we're done with this progress, let's layer on where we stand with delivering value to you, and you have that discussion, that back and forth, so that if your customer believes that you could do more, or if your customer believes that that maybe what they're seeing from you is not what they're expecting, then you have that discussion regularly, and it's not such a big deal. There's no meltdown from time to time when it comes to, hey, we're doing so much for you, and they say, no, you're not. You don't need to have that. If you have these iterative conversations, I think it eases it on, and again, it kind of maintains advocacy throughout and within different organizations.
Yeah, and the other thing with that too, of the communication, is honestly, like, I've worked with customers where they've done integrations to external, customers as well. So if, they're working on a project for the customer, this happens a lot in the automotive industry as well, because they have so many vendors, and we integrate their tools, and it helps with that communication. Because the one thing that we've seen too is that things go into a black hole and nobody really knows what happens to them. Whereas once we started integrating, they really saw that value of, the information flowing. And think about the comment sections within your tools. And then what I always tell people is, how many emails and, threads and threads of emails get started, and I'm on the email, and then I'm off the email, and then somebody else emails somebody else. So things get lost in communication. So that truly is where a lot of integration comes into play, because you can integrate those comments and you can have that communication flowing back and forth.
Yeah, I would add too, I think the automotive industry, we probably can't speak specifics here, but I mean, obviously, supply chain issues are pervasive across a lot of different industries. I mean, we've been talking a lot about internal ROI, those things, in using the tool exclusively and integration exclusively within an organization, we have a number of customers who integrate with their suppliers. So you can do, they have to do a little bit of work to, maintain their security internally on other things other than integration. But if you imagine that you have a shared tool set with the other members of your supply chain, it's the same sort of phenomenon and maybe even more powerful than the integration within an organization. So yeah, I would like to highlight that as well.
All right. The next question: what is the best way to start or prepare the case for tool integration data specifically for the C-level? So that's kind of give us a call. What I usually do with organizations is the first thing we do is we map things out. What tools you have in your end-to-end, your software development lifecycle, as well as then what artifacts are in there, what work item types are in there. Then how do we want that information to flow? So that's kind of the first thing. The next thing we start to take a look at is the fields that flow. So we start to turn it in there. From there, what we'll do is, work with you to show you the value of that. And especially at the C-level, kind of give you the information needed to take to the C-level so that they can see the value within that as well. So the best way to really prepare is really just to start to take a look at what is your end-to-end tool chain, what tools are involved, what information needs to flow that's not flowing, and help build that business case as well.
I'd add to, I mentioned these before, but some of the axes, what I call the axes of value here, where there is a C-level person, leading or interested in maybe a digital transformation or modernization of the processes. The case for integration is largely that each of these practitioners, support services, developers, test, whatever, they can use their own tools that are optimized for their specific function, right? So you want to be able to have product management, or you want to have certainly customer support use a tool that's really good for what it is they do. And so you can kind of have local optimizations within that function. Integration helps to allow those individual departments to continually locally optimize to the best of their ability, using the best tools for their role, while still maintaining this communication across the entire organization. So, it's much better, in my opinion, to use, could you use Jira as an IT and SM tool? Maybe, but you certainly don't probably want to, right? There are other tools that are better for it, ServiceNow, others like that. So you want your services team to be able to use what it is that's best for them. So you can do this local optimization. Integration helps this global optimization, right? And that's something generally what a C-level is interested in. So there's sort of two axes of optimization, both for the flow of information and other kind of optimization, decrease costs, increase revenue, all that sort of stuff. So there's that case for it. There's also the sort of nebulous benefit that I mentioned before is I think one that hits home well with more senior level folks, which is that tools integration helps bring the teams closer together. It helps collaboration. It helps each team feel that they're sort of in it together, that the other team is doing something, right, to help them. And I know it's, again, I wish somebody would do a thesis or a PhD dissertation on what the effect of that is. But I think it's sort of intuitive, and especially at a higher level, that's largely what people in the more senior levels are trying to do: make the organization function more efficiently globally, help different teams work better together. And integration is not going to solve that, but it's going to help solve that. right? And that's the way I think is a really strong way to position it to those senior leaders.
So I think well, let's jump to the chat. Perfect. We did put the slides in to be able to download. So if you want to go ahead and download those, feel free. If you have additional questions that we didn't get to, there's a lot when we talk to customers about just integration and helping them, realize the value that's out there in the ROI that they can then benefit from. So if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help in any way. Or you have questions that, once you look at the slides, you're like, hey, I thought of something else. We're happy to help out with answering any of those additional questions too. There's a lot of insights that Jeff and I both see about having the capability. I mean, we use Tasktop. We are Tasktop on Tasktop. So that was a lot of what Jeff was showing you today. So we do see that value of information flowing from team to team and allowing that, communication to increase, making sure the C-level is seeing that value as well. So as you go through and you're taking a look at things, think about how could this be applied in your environment, and what value could this add, having that integration to both your teams and to your end customers. Because at the end of the day, it is also a cost savings, even though, you might need to go out and purchase a new tool or subscribe to a new tool. You're also going to see that cost savings in multiple ways. So I want to thank you all. If there's no other questions, Jeff, did you have anything else?
Yeah, I would just kind of add maybe a sort of naked solicitation. I love talking about ROI. I really find it interesting. And so certainly if any of you out there are Tasktop or Planview customers, reach out. I love talking about it. But even if you're not, I think it's an interesting thing, and I could learn, we could talk about it. I think that's interesting. And certainly I think in this economic environment, which is, let's say, strange to say the least, I would anticipate increased focus on being able to prove demonstrable ROI of teams and tools. And, if to the extent that I can help any of you make the case for integration, or really for anything else, I would be happy to do so. Also, for those of you who use Tasktop Hub, we are continually building out the features to try to make the ROI of the tool, easier to find and easier to communicate, and try to measure and communicate those different axes of value, so that you don't have to, you can just kind of go in and justify it right there, or show, if you're seeing, when you're seeing positive ROI. So, any feedback on that, we're continually trying to hear from our customers to try to make things better. I'd love to hear from non-customers and how to make it better. I'd love to hear from anybody. So yeah, please reach out for any of those things to me, or Wendy, and I would certainly be happy to have that discussion. All right.
Well, Jeff and Wendy, I really appreciate you guys coming on today and running us through your slides. I do see a question in the audience about the recording, and so this session was in fact recorded. If you'll receive a link via email to access the recording on demand, but you can also find this webinar living on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars, and just look in the on-demand section. It should be there shortly. So to our team today, thank you so much for joining us, both Jeff and Wendy. I really appreciate the both of you joining me. We do have those 4 Amazon gift cards to give out. Our first winner is Tina W. Our second winner is Liam M. Our third winner is Michael K. And our fourth and final winner is Kathy A. So to the 4 of you, congratulations. Keep an eye on your inbox to claim that gift card. But if you do not see that email, just check your spam folder. I would like to thank Planview for sponsoring today's program. And to our audience, we really appreciate you spending time with us today. We ask for just one more moment of your time to fill out a brief post-webinar survey that will pop up on your screen here in just a moment. But otherwise, we hope to see everyone at an upcoming Techstrong Learning program. Everyone have a great rest of your day. And Jeff, Wendy, thank you once more.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Cody.